He texted, LOL, you actually thought I'd cancel my Vegas trip for your surgery? My name is Alyssa. I am 27 and work as a marketing coordinator in Chicago. For almost 3 years, I believe I had built something real with Ryan, a 29-year-old fitness influencer who loved cameras more than commitment. To his followers, he was charming, confident, disciplined. To me, he was someone I kept trying to reach through a wall made of mirrors. He liked to call me his calm balance. What he really meant was that I didn't complain enough. When I bring up how lonely I felt watching him film endless workout clips, he'd grin and tell me I was too emotional. I thought patience was proof of love. In reality, it was proof of denial. When I told him about my surgery, he barely looked up from his phone. He said it was the same weekend as Mason's bachelor trip, but that he would figure something out. I believed him because I wanted to. The night before the operation, he FaceTimed me from the airport bar, sunglasses on and a drink in his hand. He said I would be fine and that I shouldn't make it dramatic. Behind him, I could hear music and laughter. I said I wished he were here. He smiled like he hadn't heard me. That night, I stared at the ceiling, feeling my chest tighten. I had tried so hard to be understanding, to be the girlfriend who didn't make demands. But the silence of that room made one thing clear. I was dating someone who wanted the image of a relationship, not the responsibility of one. At the hospital, the nurse checked my vitals as I sent him a quick text. They're prepping me now. Wish me luck. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. The message that appeared made me freeze. LOL, you actually thought I'd cancel my Vegas trip for your surgery. My eyes blurred. I stared at it until I couldn't breathe. The nurse asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. I wasn't. When I woke up from surgery hours later, the world was quiet except for the beeping machines. I turned my phone on and saw his story on Instagram. He was by the pool in Vegas, surrounded by strangers, holding champagne. The caption said, "Work hard, play harder." The pain in my chest had nothing to do with stitches. It was the sound of something breaking inside me that had been holding on too long. Jessica, my best friend since college, arrived the next morning to take me home. She took one look at me and knew. She told me I didn't have to go back. I didn't answer, but she was right. I didn't. Back in the apartment, the smell of his cologne still floated in the air. His sneakers sat by the door. His supplements filled the counter. I sat on the couch and realized every piece of that space belonged to a man who couldn't even text me good luck. That evening, another message from him arrived. Hope you're resting. Vegas is wild. Wish you were here, LOL. The same arrogance, the same carelessness. I didn't respond. I got up, opened the closet, and began packing his things. Hoodies, shoes, tripods, camera gear, all of it into bags. I found a photo from our first anniversary at Navy Pier and stared at it for a moment. Then I dropped it gently into the trash. By the next morning, the apartment was quiet again. I called the landlord and changed the locks. His things were waiting by the door when he returned from his trip. I sent one last message saying his stuff was outside and that he shouldn't come in. Then I blocked his number, deleted his photos, and finally exhaled. For the first time in years, I felt the air move differently. The apartment wasn't filled with noise or shadows anymore. It was filled with space. Space I had earned by choosing myself. The morning light crept through the hospital blinds as the nurse clipped a small band around my wrist. My phone rested beside me on the bed, screen dark, silent. No message, no call, nothing. I took a slow breath and typed the words "They're prepping me now, I'm scared." For a moment, I hoped he would call, that maybe guilt would override his ego. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed and I reached for it like it was a lifeline. The message that appeared tore through me like a blade. LOL, you actually thought I'd cancel my Vegas trip for your surgery. My mouth went dry. The nurse asked gently if everything was okay, but my throat refused to form an answer. I forced a smile and said I was fine, though my hands shook so badly she had to help me sign the consent form. When they wheeled me into the operating room, the scent of disinfectant filled my nose, but all I could think about was that message repeating in my head. I had spent years caring for a man who couldn't even care enough to show up. When I opened my eyes hours later, everything was blurry. The nurse was saying something about a successful procedure, but her words faded under the sound of my phone vibrating on the tray beside me. My body was weak, my voice hoarse, but I reached for it anyway. The The first thing I saw wasn't his message. It was a notification from Instagram. Ryan had posted a story. He stood in a crowded nightclub, neon lights flashing across his face, women dancing beside him, a drink in his hand, smiling wide. The caption said, "Living my best life." The pain in my chest had nothing to do with stitches. It came from realizing the truth I had refused to face. The love I had been fighting for didn't exist. It was an illusion built on filtered photos and empty promises. He didn't forget me. He simply didn't care. When Jessica arrived to pick me up, she looked furious. She didn't ask what happened. She already knew. She helped me walk to her car, and the moment we sat down, she said, "You don't have to go back." I wanted to argue, to say that maybe he would apologize, but even my excuses felt tired. The drive was quiet. The only sound came from the hospital bracelet scratching against my wrist. At home, the silence felt heavier than the pain in my side. The fridge was empty except for an old protein shake he had left. My plants were withered from neglect. On the counter sat the framed photo of us at Lake Michigan, the one where we were smiling in the sunlight. I stared at it for a long time, tracing his face with my eyes, wondering how I had missed the signs. I sank onto the couch, my body aching, and let the truth settle in. This was not a bad day. This was the ending I had ignored for too long. The man I had loved could watch me go under anesthesia without a single thought, without one message, without guilt. That realization didn't break me. It cleared me. The tears never came. What replaced them was stillness, the kind that comes right before you rebuild your life from the ground up. I looked around that apartment that had once felt like ours and finally saw it for what it was. His gym bag on the floor, his shoes by the door, his life everywhere but with me. That night, I made a decision. I was done waiting for people who only remembered me when it was convenient. I picked up my phone, opened his contact, and hovered over the delete button. My thumb didn't tremble this time. I pressed it and felt lighter instantly. The silence that followed was not loneliness. It was freedom. The night I placed his clothes in trash bags, the air felt heavy but clean. Every sound in that apartment echoed differently. The hum of the fridge, the faint creak of the floorboards, even my breathing felt freer. When I dragged the bags to the hallway and shut the door, it was like sealing off a version of myself that had tolerated too much. I blocked him on every platform. Phone, Instagram, Venmo, even his email. I was done. For the first time in years, I slept without waiting for a message that never came. The next morning, my phone showed 6 missed calls from unknown numbers. I knew it was him. I listened to one voicemail out of curiosity. His voice was syrupy at first, calling me baby and saying we should talk. The next one was sharp and cold. He accused me of overreacting, of embarrassing him. He said I always ruin good things. By the end of the day, his tone had turned desperate. He asked if he could come by to pick up his things. I didn't answer. They were already gone. 2 weeks later, I quit my job. The office felt suffocating, and every conversation about weekend plans reminded me of the woman I used to be, waiting around for scraps of attention. I accepted a remote position with a small design agency in Seattle. The day my new laptop arrived, I sat at my kitchen table and promised myself that distance would not only be miles. It would be a mindset. The change was slow but steady. I started hiking every weekend. At first, it was just short trails near the city, but soon I found myself driving for hours, chasing new paths and unfamiliar skies. The silence of nature taught me how to listen again, not to someone else's excuses, but to my own thoughts. I learned to cook without worrying if anyone liked the taste. I laughed at movies without waiting for someone to join in. Jessica visited one weekend and noticed the difference before I said a word. She told me I looked lighter. I told her I felt that way too. For once, my reflection didn't look like a supporting character in someone else's life. One night, while scrolling through my phone before bed, a message from Jessica popped up. It was a screenshot. Ryan had gone live on Instagram, ranting about betrayal and fake people. He said women overreact, that no one appreciates loyalty anymore. The comments section didn't spare him. People wrote things like, "Didn't you ditch your girlfriend for Vegas?" and "Bro, you're the problem." I watched his follower count drop in real time. For a man who measured his worth in likes, that must have hurt more than any breakup ever could. Karma had a way of finding its audience. I didn't need to lift a finger. Around that same time, I got my first major project with the agency, a campaign for a local brand that wanted something bold and human. I poured everything I had into it, every ounce of emotion that used to be wasted on him. The project went viral. My boss called it a breakthrough moment. I called it closure. A few weeks later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a hoodie I had bought him on his birthday, one he never wore because he said it ruined his aesthetic. There was no note, just the hoodie folded neatly. I threw it out without hesitation. That act felt more powerful than any apology ever could. I moved into a small apartment overlooking the water. Mornings were quiet. I'd make coffee, watch the sunlight hit the waves, and remind myself how peace feels when you no longer chase people who laugh at your pain. I didn't hate him anymore. Hatred still meant he mattered. He didn't. When Jessica called to tell me he had deleted all his social media accounts, I simply smiled. I wasn't curious. I didn't look him up. The man who once thrived on attention had finally disappeared into the silence he feared most. I realized something then. Closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from the day you stop needing it. I didn't just walk away from Ryan. I walked back to myself. 6 months later, Seattle had become home in every sense. The air was colder, the mornings slower, and for the first time in years, my peace felt untouchable. I spent my mornings sitting by the window of my small apartment, watching the rain slide down the glass as steam curled from my coffee cup. My scar had healed, leaving only a faint line on my skin, and the version of me that used to beg for love in fragments had completely faded away. I didn't wake up checking my phone anymore. I didn't measure my worth through someone else's attention. My life was finally mine again. My new job at the design agency kept me busy, but it never felt like work. I led projects that allowed me to create, express, and rebuild the confidence I had once lost. My boss started calling me the calm storm because no matter how hectic deadlines got, I carried a quiet focus that never broke. They didn't know that calm was hard-earned, that it was born from heartbreak and clarity. Outside of work, I built a new rhythm. I joined a small cooking class on Saturdays, took long walks through Pike Place Market, and even adopted a rescue dog named Milo. He was timid at first, all nerves and trust issues, a little too much like me when I first moved here. But over time, he grew comfortable, learned to run without fear, and sit beside me every evening while I read or watched the city lights reflect over the water. Healing looked like that, quiet, consistent, and full of small victories no one clapped for but me. One morning, as the rain tapped against the window, I noticed a message request on my phone. It was from him, Ryan. The name that once made my stomach twist now only brought a small sigh. The message was short. Hope you're doing great. I've been thinking about you. I stared at it for a moment, coffee in hand, feeling no anger, no ache, no temptation to reply. Just gratitude. Gratitude for how far I'd come. Without hesitation, I deleted the message and turned off my phone. The silence that followed was beautiful. Later that day, Jessica called. She told me she was engaged, and we laughed about how love looks different when it's with someone who actually listens. She said she saw Ryan's name pop up online again, that he was trying to rebuild his influencer brand, posting old photos and recycle captions about success and motivation. It didn't make me bitter. If anything, it made me certain that some people never learn because their pride is louder than their pain. I wished him well in my heart and left it there. That evening, I walked with Milo along the waterfront. The sun was setting behind the clouds, painting the sky in soft streaks of pink and gray. The city hummed around me, alive but peaceful. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who waited by her phone for a man to care, who believed love was proven by sacrifice. She was gone now, replaced by someone stronger, softer, and wiser. Healing, I realized, isn't loud. It doesn't always come with a grand moment of closure or revenge. Sometimes it's just waking up one morning and realizing you haven't thought about the person who hurt you in weeks. It's drinking coffee without anxiety, laughing at your own jokes, and walking your dog in the rain with no one to impress. That night, I sat by the window again, watching the lights of the city blur through the rain. The reflection looking back at me wasn't broken or waiting for an apology. She was whole. She was content, and she had learned the lesson the hard way, that when someone laughs at your pain, they don't deserve a seat in your healing. Ryan kept chasing the spotlight, trying to be seen. I found peace in the quiet, learning that attention fades, but self-respect stays. The life I'd built wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and it was mine. I no longer needed anyone to witness my growth to make it real. As I finished my coffee and turned off the lights, I smiled to myself. The storm that once tore me apart had built me into something stronger. And that, I realized, was the real glow up.